Germany has confirmed it will send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine and allow other countries to do the same. Chancellor Scholz telling his cabinet this morning 14 of the fighting vehicles will be sent from Germany, and we are expecting that the US will confirm later it too will send its own Abrams battle tanks. This all adds to the biggest military backing yet by Western countries in a war that has been raging for nearly a year now. We've had reaction from the Kremlin too, Russia describing this move as extremely dangerous. But let's have a look at what's happening right now in Berlin. This is pictures from inside the Bundestag. We are expecting Chancellor Scholz to start answering questions from German lawmakers. And he has spoken already today. We know he has said that the goal is to quickly establish 2 battalions with Leopard 2 tanks, all going to Ukraine, and added, crucially, that the training of the troops in Germany will begin soon. And he's also expecting that they will provide both logistics and ammunition. So the scene inside the Bundestag there, we're keeping an eye on what is happening there. But let's just bring you reaction to this announcement. The Kremlin saying that if Western battle tanks are supplied to Ukraine, they will be destroyed on the battlefield. They have criticised the move as a failed plan. We've heard from countries like France and the UK, though, they are welcoming Germany's decision. Also hearing from Madrid that Spain says they too are open to providing Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. And we've had a tweet from Poland. Now, Poland's been very critical of Germany, but the Prime Minister now saying thank you to Olaf Scholz. The decision to send Leopards to Ukraine is a big step towards stopping Russia. And he says, together we are stronger. Well, let's bring you the very latest from Berlin and take you to outside the Bundestag, where the Damien McGuinness is.
We now have the confirmation. We first got rumours of this last night when German media reports started leaking the idea that Germany would indeed send 14 Leopard 2 tanks, an incredibly controversial move for many people, but also very welcome for a lot of others. And yes, what it looks like is going to happen is German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has managed to get together an alliance of European countries and Washington as well, it seems, if that's confirmed, to send battle tanks to Ukraine, which would mean various different countries from Poland to Scandinavia would be allowed to send German-made battle tanks. Germany needs to agree to that according to export guidelines and rules. And so that means not only Germany sending these 14 tanks, but multiple different countries sending each a dozen, 2 dozen tanks, which all really adds up. But as you say, this has been a very controversial matter for a long time now, for months, really split the country, split Parliament behind me, and also even split Chancellor Scholz's government. So he'll be very glad that this row is over, but he's still really got to get German voters on side, because a lot of them are still very nervous about the idea of escalation, and they worry that the more you put weapons into a conflict, the worse things get.
Tell us a bit more about these tanks, though, Damien, and what's involved in terms of sending them, and also possibly the training that is involved too once the tanks go to Ukraine.
Yeah, that's a big issue, the training. Now, just 2 days ago, Boris Pistorius, the defence minister, again said that US allies, and he said it again yesterday, should definitely start training Ukrainian soldiers on these Leopard 2 tanks. The training can last months and months and months, but what we've seen so far, experts say, is that Ukrainian soldiers are obviously very motivated and have adapted to these Western tanks extremely quickly. So a lot of experts predict the training would be quicker than usual, but of course it has to be all integrated. You have a couple of different problems, one of them being that if Washington does send these Abrams battle tanks, they have a completely different type of fuel, they have a different capacity, they're much heavier, they're less efficient. That's one of the advantages of the Leopard 2 tanks, apparently, and they are in the States, so they would need to be transported over. And I think a lot of people here are saying, well, there are a lot of questions of logistics, of combining those 2 different sorts together. The advantage of the Leopard 2 tanks is you have supplies in Europe, you have thousands of tanks already in European countries. So the tanks are there, the infrastructure is there, and now the political willingness is there. And that was the most difficult thing, really, because I think it being such a controversial issue because of Germany's painful 20th century and its idea of its responsibility to its wartime guilt, the idea of sending German-made tanks into areas where the Nazis once committed atrocities is is a difficult thing for German voters to deal with because it goes against a lot of the founding principles of the German state. But the majority of people here do support sending weapons to Ukraine because there's an awareness here that this is a war that needs to be supported. Otherwise, it'll just go further and further on. So it's a controversial matter, but the mainstream political opinion and mainstream vote opinion really is in support of what the Chancellor is doing right now.
Damien McGuinness there. We are keeping a close eye, as I mentioned, on what is happening in the Bundestag. There is Chancellor Scholz right now. Now, he is taking questions from lawmakers later, but is just currently updating them on the decision to send the Leopard 2 tanks. And one of the things that he has said already is that he spoke with President Zelensky. They discussed the current situation and what Germany is going to do in response. So there's been a lot of pressure from President Zelensky, from other European countries as well, on Chancellor Scholz to send these tanks. So there'll be a huge amount of relief. This is being celebrated across Ukraine at the moment. They are also closely watching this in Brussels as well, and the EU officials closely keeping an eye on what is happening. I've been speaking to German politician and member of the European Parliament, David McAllister, who told me he was very happy with this decision.
Well, I welcome that finally the German government took this decision. It took them a long time to decide, perhaps too long, but now the decision has been taken, so I welcome this.
There in Brussels, talking to your colleagues, does it feel like Chancellor Scholz and Germany's reputation has been damaged because of the slowness of this decision, the fact that it's taken this long for him to come to this realization?
Indeed, and I share this criticism. The German government, led by Olaf Scholz, has, since February last year, taken many decisions only very late and only under immense external pressure. And this was the case also with the first 14 Leopard tanks, which will be sent to Ukraine.
So Chancellor Scholz, President Zelensky have spoken already. We know that President Zelensky has said these tanks will be a game changer in the war. They are considered the world's leading battle tank with a near perfect combination of firepower, mobility and protection. And as well as being the best, they are easier to repair than some of the other Western alternatives. And they require less fuel. They are equipped with 120mm smooth bore gun and 2 coaxial light machine guns. It needs a crew of 4, the Leopard 2. A commander, gunner, loader and a driver. And they can cover a range of 500 kilometres and have a top speed of 68 kilometres per hour. Let's talk more now and go live to Springfield in Virginia, where Michael Linnick is standing by, Senior Defence Researcher at the RAND Corporation. Michael, would you agree with President Zelensky? Is the deployment of, say, 100, 120, we're possibly hearing from right around Europe, of these Leopard 2 tanks, is it going to be a game changer in the war?
So I think that the introduction of these main battle tanks into the war can certainly help the Ukrainians. It depends a lot on how they choose or are able to employ them. Tanks per se aren't a game changer, but integrating them effectively into a combined arms offensive will give the Ukrainians some options that they simply don't have today, some advantages that they simply don't have today. So I'm not sure that I would suggest that giving them 120 tanks would absolutely change the war, but it certainly gives them opportunities to do some things that right now they can't. And those may, if done correctly in a combined arms fashion, be able to allow them to retake some of the territory that they're seeking to retake.
Michael, we understand as well that a deal has been done with the US and they will send some Abrams tanks. Are they as good as the Leopard 2s?
So the Abrams tank, the Leopard 2, the Challenger 2, these are all sort of the same class of tanks. They're, 60 to 80 tons, depending on how they're outfitted or whatever. They're all very, very similar. They have different logistics challenges, different training requirements. They have certain different aspects to them about armor or fire control systems. But essentially, I think the addition of the Abrams is no different from a combat perspective than the use of the Leopard 2. It certainly is a political statement that the United States has chosen to do that. The interesting or challenging part will be fighting a mixed fleet of tanks where you have Abrams fighting with Leopards, fighting with Challengers, and that can be something that they'll have to figure out how to do logistically from a training perspective and operationally.
And is it true to say, Michael, that this hardware is better than what the Russians have?
I think there's general agreement about that. That the main battle tanks that the West has chosen to develop over the last 30 years have a lot of advantages, not the least of which I think is range and accuracy. But also, we've chosen to armor our vehicles a little bit heavier than the Russians do. So I think there's general agreement that these are a combat advantage over the Russian tanks. But I just remind people that there's a lot of ways to kill tanks today. It's not just about tank versus tank. And the big threats to these kinds of tanks can come from a lot of the more modern weaponry, including the smart weapon systems, the drones, precision munitions. So it's not a straight tank on tank comparison at this point. Over.
Really good to get your thoughts. Michael, thank you so much. We've been hearing about all of the political pressure that has been building on Chancellor Scholz and Germany to send these Leopard tanks. Part of that campaign from Ukraine has been a social media push by its own citizens. There's been a hashtag doing the rounds, Free the Leopards. It's been popular on socials as Ukrainians have been posting with their own favourite leopard print clothing, sending a clear message to Germany. The country's musicians and artists have also been joining in to add to the momentum. So Free the Leopard, a very popular hashtag in Ukraine right now.